scallions are so much more than the green stuff scattered on top of your loaded baked potato. Spring onions, green onions, scallions, whatever you want to call them, are the first sign of a new season. The very first green indicator of all the good stuff to come.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm Vivian, and I'm a chef. My husband Ben and I were working for some of the best chefs in New York City when my parents offered to help us open our own restaurant. Of course, there was a catch. We had to open this restaurant in eastern North Carolina, where I grew up, and said I would never return.
I wish you'd see yourself as beautiful as I see you. Why can't you see yourself as beautiful as I see you?
So this is my life. Raising twins, living in the house I grew up in, and exploring the South, one ingredient at a time. Previously on A Chef's Life. I am trying to write and deliver a cookbook by January. So I've got a little shot list, and I've never done this before.
There you go. That's the money shot.
I'm going to meet my new editor this morning.
When you're focused on the book, how much of your head is back in the kitchen?
My life the past year has taken me out of the daily workings of the restaurant. You know, I'm feeling a little weird because I don't work at Chef and the Farmer every day anymore. And I feel kind of like a fish out of water. It's a very strange feeling.
Thank you so much for being here, the great Vivian Howard.
My pleasure, thank you.
And I always say it is so unfair to have amazing chefs here right at lunchtime because it's just, all I want to do is eat your tomato pie, pretty much right now.
You'll have to wait till next summer.
So talk to me about this cookbook, because I read it and I love how you, I don't want to say demystify, but really clarify, I think is a better word, Southern cooking, and the very simple ingredients you need, the fact that it's not just fried chicken and fried catfish, and that there's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of seasonal vegetables and fruits involved.
Right, well, you know, most of the world has it wrong, I think. You know, we think that Southern food has a big, you know, always a big honking piece of meat at the center of the plate. Fried chicken, fried catfish, ribs, something along those lines. But it's traditionally a vegetable and grain-focused cuisine, and with tons of variety. And so that's kind of the approach I took with my book.
So how long? I mean, the book is long.
Yeah, it's like
it's a labor of love.
575 pages.
How did you go about writing it and picking out which recipes you would include?
Well, the book is kind of formatted a little bit like the show. So every episode of the show is based on one ingredient, and we go really deep into that ingredient.
Peas is my favorite.
And so I identified the ingredients that I felt were quintessentially Southern and specifically related to my region, Eastern North Carolina. And in every chapter, I write a recipe for what is the most traditional, historically sound version of that ingredient. So like, you know, we all know collard greens. There's a very basic recipe for stewed collard greens with ham hocks in the book, in the collard chapter. And then from there, the recipes grow in creativity and technique across the collard chapter. So in the end of that chapter, you have something that you might see in our restaurant that would be like a creamed collard stuffed potato with pickled collard stems. So, you know, it's rooted in that that original recipe, but it's designed for a modern palate.
So for someone who has cooked pasta before, what recipe do you think they should try first?
You know, I think that the recipe that speaks to all walks of life, except if you're a vegetarian, and all skill levels, is my mom's chicken and rice. And it was the comfort food of my youth, and it is just that, chicken and rice. And it's one of these deceptively simple recipes that anyone can do, but you do need to follow the directions. And it's wonderful on like a cold, rainy day where you're trapped inside watching Netflix or something.
Now, how do you test out these recipes? Because I know that there's a very, very thorough process involved.
Yeah, for me, it was really important that the recipes in the book work. And so the idea is like, I write the recipe, I test the recipe, I feel good about the recipe, and then I give the recipe to a average home cook and have he or she test the recipe. And then what a lot of recipe testers will do is they'll fill out a form, did this work? Did you like it? Would you make it again? But that was not really enough for me. I wanted to see what she did. So I had her bring it to me. And, because she thought it was good, I might not think it's exactly what I had intended. So that was a really thorough, exhausting process.
I was going to say, because I watch your show, and you are tough on what comes out of your kitchen in the restaurant. Like, you're very meticulous and very specific.
Yeah.
And you apply that to every recipe, it sounds like.
Yeah, we were just talking in the back about how finicky the restaurant business is, and how particular diners are, and so it's important that everything that comes out of the kitchen is right on, and at least what I think is right on. So you have to be tough, and I think they have captured some of my tougher moments on the show, for better or worse.
Your name on the menu, so if you're responsible at the end of the day.
Absolutely, yeah. Even if I'm not there, people think that I'm in the back, cooking everything that they're going to put in their mouth. So it's important that it reflects my standards.
What is the toughest part of running a restaurant, aside from having your own family and trying to be present for your kids? Having a restaurant and having your name on it, that must be just both incredibly gratifying and incredibly headache-inducing.
Yeah, one of the tough things about running a restaurant that I didn't really think about when I started working in restaurants was that you are working when everyone else is celebrating. So whether it be holidays or weekends or just at night, I have young children now, and I would love to be at home and fix dinner for them and sit down as a family, but more often than not, we're working at night, and that never stops. Even if your restaurant serves lunch, dinner is probably the most important service of the day, and so it's important for you to be present there.
A friend of mine owns a restaurant in San Francisco, and he has taken 2 days off only since he's opened it, and that was for the births of both of his kids, and that's it.
Well, that's extreme.
Like he doesn't trust anyone to do his job for him.
Yeah, but we've been open 10 years, so you got to let go at some point, and part of what this season of the show is about is me just deciding that there are things in life that I want more than just having control over everything at the restaurant.
What has surprised you the most about opening a restaurant back home?
How receptive people have been to a new style of cooking. We're in rural eastern North Carolina, and people have traditionally really liked their food very soft and and very salty. And we've had a fair amount of success introducing them to different textures and more acidity. I like a lot of acidity in my food. And so if you lead people to water, sometimes they'll drink it.
Maybe if you add a little sparkling.
Yeah, if you lead them to booze. Yeah.
I love the foreword of your book because you really simplify cooking. You use 2 olive oils, one for hot dishes, one for when you're not heating it. So talk to me about some of the other, like your go-tos, because I feel like your go-tos are so accessible.
Right. Yeah. I wanted the book to be something that anyone could use. So I have very simple taste in gadgets and the basics in my larder. So yeah, I love Diamond Crystal's kosher salt. It's available in every grocery store, and I love the texture of it. And it's like if I go to a kitchen and they don't have it, I'm completely lost. And I have a 10-inch chef's knife and a small paring knife that's serrated. And I think everyone should get one of those. They're like $3 and incredibly useful for slicing tomatoes or anything that has kind of a tough skin. I use 2 olive oils, an inexpensive blend from the grocery store when I'm applying heat or sauteing something, and then a nicer olive oil that I enjoy the taste of for salads and drizzling on things just before we eat them. I have an affinity for this gadget we call it a collard chopper. I'm not sure that it has another name. They're not widely available, but it's basically like a round blade, very serrated blade that has a handle. And you can chop greens, you can chop nuts, you can chop fruit. We used to do it to chop strawberries for making strawberry shortcake. And it's one of these things that, like, you could use a food processor, but then you have to wash the food processor, which I'd almost rather do anything other than that. But this is just very simple. You can rinse it off, and it does almost the same thing that a food processor would. So a collard chopper, I'm bringing it back.
I'm gonna bring it back, and also the I forget what it's
The
called.
microplane.
Oh.
I sleep with my microplane.
I have one too, and it really does exfoliate your skin very. It's the unfortunate side effect of the microplane. I mean, it works amazing for everything, but you have to just be very on point when using it.
Yeah, you can really cut yourself. I think you're talking about a mandolin. So a mandolin is a slicer that you can slice things into very thin sheets.
No, I'm talking about like when you grate. You can use
Okay, so yeah,
the
that's a microplane. Yes, I guess you could use it on your feet too if you wanted. I've never done that. I'm sorry.
No, I just meant like as a joke because it really does. You have to be very careful when you do it if you're not paying attention.
Absolutely.
Which I have done many times where you're just kind of not focused and then it's like, oops.
Right, I've got a little, yes.
Now, I know this is probably asking you, like, pick your favorite twin, but what is your favorite recipe to make? Your absolute go-to if you had to make one recipe every night for the rest of your life?
Oh, my Lord. One recipe every night for the rest of my life. I would say greens and pasta, and I would assume that I could have some variation.
Of course,
in that.
Of course.
But I find pasta very satisfying, and I love greens of all kinds. Turnip greens, I love the bitterness that they offer. Collard greens, spinach, kale, absolutely every green out there speaks to me.
And what to you defines good Southern cooking? Because as we were saying back there, there's just such, and up here also, there's such a misconception about what it is.
I think good Southern cooking is based around not wasting anything and cooking from a place of giving, of love. Whenever I think of the food that I grew up on, it was all prepared with the intention of nurturing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what all good food in general is based on.
If you could invite 4 famous chefs to a dinner party, who would they be and why?
That would be my worst nightmare. A lot of chefs love cooking for
other chefs, I know.
But that makes me so nervous. Could this be living or? Okay, so Edna Lewis I would love to cook for her. Alice Waters.
Of course.
Alice, of course. Yes. I'm a big fan of Thomas Keller. His book, The French Laundry, was, kind of, I think every cook should have it. And I think I'd have to say maybe Wiley Dufresne. I worked in his kitchen briefly when
WD-50?
Yes, when I was much younger, and I was kind of a mess. and I don't think anyone there thought that I would ever amount to anything, and so I'd love to have him over for dinner.
Now, what would you make?
Well, I'd stick with Southern food. Maybe I'd start with my mom's chicken and rice, but gussied up a little bit with some elements of texture and maybe some crispy chicken skin.
Crispy chicken skin.
I mean,
now you're talking my language.
Absolutely. And then I think that maybe we would have maybe those cream collared stuffed potatoes with pickled stems, some roasted beets, something that's very vegetable driven. And then I'd probably end with my warm banana pudding.
Just stop right there.
Yeah, and bourbon, probably.
And last question before we go to our audience. What do you remember the first time you cooked something where you realized you had an affinity and a love for it?
When I was in college, I used to cook for all my roommates, and I did it because it made them happy, and then I kept doing it because I felt like I was good at it. And so I can't remember what I first made. It was probably like a chicken quesadilla or something, but it gave me a certain feeling that I enjoyed. And I remember those moments.
See, this is why you're a chef and why I'm not. I used to make hot pockets in college.
Oh, I made those too, the lean pockets. So it was even
Same
worse.
difference, right? At least you were making probably gourmet quesadillas with fresh vegetables.
I'm sure I was trying, yes.
And now to our audience, please.
Hey, Vivian. My parents just moved to Greensboro, North Carolina, and they're trying to recruit me. So I guess I want to ask, what didn't you miss about New York, or what were some pros to moving?
Well, I'm in New York, so I'm going to be gentle, but one of the things that Greensboro is a pretty large city or town, so you won't suffer the same things that I did, but I missed being able to go out for brunch or to a nice market or shopping for anything, really, because but the things that I did not miss, the convenience of living anywhere really other than New York is pretty high. My standard of living, when we moved, we were living on 151 and Broadway in a 5th floor walk up in a 1-bedroom apartment that was like maybe 800 square feet, and this was 11 years ago, and our rent was $1,800. And then I moved to North Carolina, and my standard of living is so much higher. And I didn't realize this at the time because I didn't have kids, but transportation, I'll just say, in the city is a challenge. And there's something to be said for being able to drive your car and park it and then go into wherever you're going and come out and get back in your car.
Next question, please.
Hey, Vivian, thank you for being here. What are some of your favorite fall time ingredients?
Fall next to summer is really my favorite time of year to cook because I love sweet potatoes and butternut squash and pecans and all the warm spices that we think of when we think of fall, like cinnamon and nutmeg and brown butter. So brown butter is something that anybody can do. You just heat butter on the stove until the milk solids start to brown and they take on this nutty aroma. And it's just a great, not only like fat, but a flavor, you're adding flavor. And so I think of brown butter when I think of fall.
And root vegetables.
And all kinds of root vegetables. And my favorite current root, and it's something that you can find really easily in New York, is a Hackeri turnip. So turnips kind of get a bad rap in general because they're often bitter and not exciting. But Hackeri turnips are little, sometimes they're called Tokyo turnips. They're little, small turnips with very tender greens, and they're great raw or roasted. If you see them, buy them. Trust me.
Next question, please.
Hello. So I know a lot of people use wine as an ingredient when they're cooking, and I love wine. So I just wanted to know, what wines would you recommend using if you're going to cook a dish?
Well, I like to save the good wine for drinking. And then you can, if you have leftover wine that is maybe past its prime, you know, I always save those old bottles for cooking. Because if you apply heat to wine and, you know, evaporate out a lot of its flavor, then you should not be spending much money on it, because all the care and attention that was taken to make that wine excellent has evaporated out of your pan. So I would use my leftover wine for cooking, or buy something inexpensive but not awful at the grocery store or the wine shop.
And we have time for one more question, please.
Hey, thanks for being here. My question is about kale. I hate kale, and I try different types. So what's your favorite way to make kale, especially for someone that really doesn't like the bitterness of kale?
You know, I'm with you. I don't mind
too.
kale. I don't mind it, but I think that something happened a few years ago and people became kale crazy. And I think that could have actually been the case with any green, but kale was just the one that was selected, was anointed by the kale gods. But yeah, I think that it tends to be a little bitter, but there is one type of kale that I would recommend trying if you haven't, and that's dino kale or lacinato kale, Lacinato, and it's a little darker, and from my perspective, less bitter and less tough. And they'll have that in a Whole Foods market or at the farmer's market here. And whenever I try to add, if I'm having like a massaged kale salad or even like sauteed kale, add a little bit of honey to counterbalance that bitterness. And try to buy smaller kale. Smaller kale is going to be less bitter.
That is actually very good kale advice. Thank you so
Or
much.
try collards.
And your book is out now.
On October 4th.
October 4th. And it's going to be available Amazon, bookstores.
Amazon, everywhere, yes.
And tell us about your show.
A Chef's Life, the 4th season just started airing, and it's on PBS everywhere, but at different times in different markets.
And you can stream it.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Vivian Howard.
Thank y'all.